The crisis at our southern border is still ongoing, and this as sources say a rise in border deaths from drowning and dehydration are overwhelming morgues in border cities. Meanwhile, dozens of illegal immigrants are stepping off buses in New York City and Washington, D.C., sent by the Texas governor. We have our border correspondent Jason Jones in Austin, Texas, with the very latest on a situation that continues to get worse.
Tom, good afternoon. It's good to be with you. You know, as we talk about this border and how it continues to just de-escalate and fall apart day after day, and some of the things you just described, I want to show you some exclusive video that Newsmax has been able to obtain that occurred day before yesterday. And what you're witnessing right now is video taken from a drone from a private citizen in a security group who launched their drone day before yesterday in Arivaca, Arizona. And just a few hundred yards from our border, what you are seeing is a Sinaloa cartel forward operating base, which is heavily fortified. And I also want you to see here this gunman that they were able to capture on video, full chest plate carrier, along with a long gun. This is what's taking place along our border. Now, why is this important? Because the Sinaloa cartel is bringing more deadly fentanyl than any other cartel in Mexico. They're also one of the largest cartels globally operating. And when you think of the failures happening at the Southwest border, this is a great example because you have to ask yourself, how in the world can the cartel have a fortified base on our border, and yet our executive leadership of DEA, FBI, and others are doing nothing to stop this? We should not be seeing these videos from a journalist. This should be coming from the executive leadership of law enforcement to explain to the American people how this border is degrading. So if you're sitting in the north and you're wondering how in the world is so much deadly fentanyl and methamphetamine getting into this country, what you need to know is this is how. We're doing nothing to stop these cartels, and this is why we are seeing so many of our own citizens dying in this country from fentanyl and many other deadly drugs.
Jason Jones, always so powerful what you bring us, and you know, again, we appreciate everything that you're doing down there on the southern border. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Tom. Good to be with you.
To continue our discussion about that fentanyl crisis killing thousands of Americans, we welcome in drug policy expert and the executive vice president of Smart Approaches to Marijuana, an organization that informs Americans about the dangers of high-potency THC drugs and other harmful substances, Luke Niforatos. Luke, it's good to see you, but this is a daily American tragedy unfolding here. And not to get political about it, but I never hear about it from Joe Biden or a lot of folks in Washington. For those folks who don't fully appreciate just how deadly fentanyl is, give us some perspective here.
Yeah, and Tom, thank you for having me on the show. It's such a pleasure, and hope you're doing well. What we're seeing right now with fentanyl is something this country's never seen before. Our overdose fatalities just in this last year peaked over 100,000 Americans who have died from overdose, and over 70%, maybe even over 80% of those overdoses were from fentanyl-related ODs. And so fentanyl, all it takes is a tiny little grain of it, literally, smaller than your fingertip, and that could be deadly for you. So what we're seeing is, a lot of what we're hearing about is how fentanyl is being laced into the drug supply. So we have all these illicit drugs that are trafficked across our borders by the cartels, like the Sinaloa cartel we just heard about, and other cartels from Mexico, as well as from China, is a major supplier of this fentanyl. And so people are lacing it into other drugs, like marijuana, like methamphetamine. And so what we're really seeing is our young adults, folks who aren't really addicted to marijuana addicted to drugs in most cases. They take a pill that they think maybe is methamphetamine or cocaine, has a tiny little bit of fentanyl in it, and they drop on the spot and overdose and die.
Luke, kids are going back to college. It's every parent's absolute nightmare that their child would take something that they didn't know was deadly like this. What can schools, what can parents, what can students do to protect themselves? And now Homeland Security is telling us, well, they're making these like colored pills that look totally harmless.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what can people do here?
Yeah, so really honestly, what I would tell you and what I would tell our college students is that using drugs has never been safe, but right now using drugs has never been deadlier, because the supply, you don't know what is in it. Fentanyl could be in anything that you are given at a party. There is no way to be sure that fentanyl is not in these drugs unless you happen to have some sort of testing ability, but most people don't. So the best message right now to our college students is do not use drugs, period. The supply is deadly. You don't know what could be in these pills right now.
And it's even in marijuana, and it's even getting into some of these THC products. What can governments be doing here? Because public policy plays a very big role. We've seen since legalization of marijuana, for instance, Colorado is now the #1 state for cocaine use, and we've seen 60% increases in young adults using pot or psychedelics. So what would you say if you're a voter, if you're somebody having this public policy conversation with a local government or the federal government?
What I would say is to voters, look at what's happened from marijuana legalization and liberalization policies on drugs. We're treating them like they're no big deal. We have the greatest crime tsunami our country's seen. I live in Colorado. We are the 47th state, basically dead last for our crime issues and law enforcement issues. So clearly allowing more drugs into the borders and treating them like no big deal has been a problem for us. So we need multi-pronged strategy here, re-educate the public on why we don't do drugs, why we don't want to see more drug use in our communities. We need to take on these cartels, enforce the laws at our borders, and stop this fentanyl supply, stop marijuana and other drugs from coming over our borders. We need a multi-pronged effort, but it starts up top. We need to hear from our government leaders why using drugs is a bad idea, why legalizing drugs is a bad idea. I mean, my state of Colorado, we're the top for cocaine. And I was just looking at the stats from the NIH. More than 20,000 Americans died from something related to cocaine just in the last year. So people need to be reminded why these drugs are dangerous and why we can't allow them to, proliferate across our borders.
And finally, just switching topics with you real quick. In New York, you now have to be 21 to buy whipped cream because of concerns about kids doing whippets. But youth use of these THC products and marijuana is spiking. You smell it everywhere here in New York on the streets. Our priorities are so screwed up, Luke, and people are really hurting. We never hear about this from the president or from the White House or from the National Drug Control Policy Office. Whatever happened to that?
Yeah, unfortunately, this has just become a political football. And there are those who say, we need to start legalizing drugs because it's compassionate, it's going to reduce harm for people who are addicted. But what they don't realize is that, allowing this to become political, saying that we should just allow drugs to be sold and dealt and all of that actually hurts more people.
Yeah.
So we need a much more nuanced approach to drug policy. We need more leadership from the Office of National Drug Control Policy to speak the truth about the harms of these drugs, why they need to stay legal, and why we need to do more to enforce at the borders and stop this stuff from flowing in.
And I just remember during the Trump administration, the Surgeon General used to talk about the harms of this all the time. We never hear about that anymore. Luke Niforatos, thank you so much for breaking that down. Please let folks take what Luke said to heart. Don't come anywhere near any substance that is, because anything can be laced with fentanyl at this point. And check out his website, learnaboutsam.org. Thank you, Luke.
Thank you, Tom. God bless.